I've never actually experienced a personal injury or illness that caused me pain, but I've seen other people suffer and it just makes me feel really bad.
I suffer sometimes when I see other people suffering. So when I see like a poor child doesn't have food, when I see, you know, homeless people on the side of New York City.
I suffered like when a family member died.
I think the worst was when my grandpa passed away. I was really close to him, and that was really when it hit me that I was alone and I didn't have my best friend anymore.
I've broken my back and I have 3 bulging discs in my back from a car accident.
I had a cousin that died, and he and I were like the best of friends. With my brother, he and I are 11 months apart, and we could be like the best of friends, but you know, I have to deal with him having cerebral palsy.
In the last 2 months, I've had 3 people who are close to me die.
I've had a lot of injuries that cause me pain, but pain, you get used to it.
The real suffering I've endured in my life would probably be my grandpa dying a couple years ago.
My father had a heart attack when I was in freshman year of high school, and that really took a toll on my family. You know, he almost died, and that made me look at things a lot differently. You take life for granted, and you know, in a second it could be gone.
I know a lot of people who've had cancer and depression. I know people who've committed suicide that are close to me, and it's really sad.
My mom has liver cancer, and she's actually in the hospital now because she just had a liver transplant.
My parents went through a divorce. That's some kind of suffering for being like a young teenager. I've moved so many times, so there's so much frustration changing schools.
Probably one of the biggest questions about a life of faith is why a God who is good allows suffering.
It's not always an easy answer.
Most of us experience some kind of suffering in our lives at some point.
Whether it's a death of someone we know,
a sickness or painful injury,
or a relationship gone wrong.
Dealing with suffering is part of what it means to be human.
But we can choose how we approach that situation and what we do with that suffering.
And we can even transform our suffering into holiness.
Personal suffering, making it holy. That's what we'll be talking about today. Hi everyone, I'm Carolee.
And I'm Justin.
And this is Real Faith TV. The teens on the street shared with us how they experience personal suffering.
We'll hear from them again a little later in the show, as well as meet our studio guests.
But first, let's meet our spotlight guest, Angelica.
She will share with us what it means to suffer, how she responds to suffering,
and how God has helped her through her suffering.
To me, the word suffering means a time of distress or pain and someone's time of need, especially with God, when they're stressing out something that's going on in their life that's really difficult for them to go through. It also could mean hard time when either family members putting stress on them or school or anything can just be a suffering for someone, small or large. I'm never ready for whatever suffering that comes towards me. I have cried, broken down, been angry, wasn't able to control my anger, thought the world was crashing on me. I felt that I should do things that, you know, aren't good for me, where I think that everything's bad, like why not do worse? I've suffered several things in my life. I think that suffering teaches us a lot about life, and it also encourages us to be more willing in God's presence, because as long as you give it to God and have faith in God, your path will become a lot more clear. Whatever's too hard for me, I know He can help me. I know He can lift me up. It's always made me a stronger person. It brings me closer to God. I know that He's there to help me. I know that God will guide me to the light.
2 years ago when my uncle, he was gonna marry this woman who didn't really respect my mom or anybody in my family. And it actually came to the point where she called my mom and she cursed her out, saying that she didn't belong in the family and that it wasn't right for my mom to even talk to her. Our uncle actually ended up just inviting us to the wedding because of our differences and just kind of like shut us out. I've had a really hard time dealing with that. He was like my brother. He lived with me for a while growing up, and I was so close to him, and for him to do that to me, it really hurt, and I had to really turn to God and believe that it happened for some reason, and it's really hard to go through something like that.
I've lost a friend, but it's really helped me, it strengthened my faith, and it helped me to realize that, you know, every day, you know, live life to, you know, to the fullest, as corny as it sounds. You really should appreciate every moment, every time you have with the ones you love, and grow close with God.
Let's meet our studio guests and find out how they have experienced suffering in their lives.
Okay, they are Ricky, Allie, Colleen, Sarah, Annie, Leanne, and Emily.
So have you experienced personal suffering in your lives?
Yeah, when my grandpa died, it was really, really tragic for me. He was my best friend, and it really tore me up. And the only way I could come through that was by believing in God and believing in His plan. And it really brought me closer to God. It made me stronger.
The beginning of this year, I went from a small Catholic school to a bigger, a lot bigger high school and all. My friends from my old school were getting upset and stuff because I was making new friends, and they just completely cut me out of their life, and I felt like I was losing a half of me because they meant so much to me.
For me, when my grandmother passed away, it brought on a lot of suffering because my dad's family split apart from us. We don't talk to them anymore. The hardest part for me that brought so much suffering was seeing my dad suffer, because it's more than just his mom dying, his whole family left. So it took a lot, but within him finding God kind of helped me go back to the religion.
When I was in 6th grade, there was this guy in 8th grade who was my brother's friend and who I thought was my friend. He sexually harassed me and tried to rape me, and that's always kind of haunted me. I didn't know what to do, and I've always thought about it and gone through the memories. When I was so scared about this, I turned to my mom. I know that God brought me through it to become closer with my mom.
My dad doesn't live with us. My parents are divorced. So I don't have a father figure around me all the time. Most of my friends have 2 parents with them. Sometimes it hurts me that I don't have that father figure around like other kids do, but like she does, I now have a close relationship with my mom.
Personal suffering has many faces.
For one, it may be coming home to parents who are fighting every day.
For another, it may be a broken romance.
And for others, it might be a serious or life-threatening illness.
Or even a death or suicide of a friend or family member.
Whether we suffer as a result of emotional or physical pain, or both,
suffering seeps into our whole experience of life.
So how do we deal with suffering?
That's what we asked the teens on the street.
Let's check it out.
I've dealt with the suffering by praying a lot and going to church as often as I can.
Praying and talking to my friends about it, cry about it.
I've given to charity and stuff. I guess prayer is a really good way to get over suffering.
I've dealt with the suffering by just talking to my friends and my family.
I would talk to my mom and my best friends. I'd sleep and eat a lot.
With the suffering we've gotten from the car accident, we usually deal with it by going to our church for healing masses, and it actually does really make you feel enlightened and makes the pain go away for a while.
There's other bad ways I've dealt with it, but it's not the good ways, and I learned from my mistakes and stopped it. Now I know that the best thing to do is to just talk to people about your problems and your injuries and pain.
Grow from it and take one day at a time.
I visit my cousin every weekend in the hospital. I see their family all the time. I just be there for him and support him.
You're gonna have to help them out, help the families out. You have to be there for them. You have to go to the funerals.
Just think about them, talk about them. Just remember him pretty much.
I'm trying to help do for my brother as well, because he doesn't get to actually have the whole full high school experience. So it's I'm doing it for both of us, and then my cousin, because he couldn't finish high school.
I cried a lot, honestly. I just let it all out, But I realized that, I can move on and become a stronger person from this and hold my family closer and my friends closer to me and realize that, not every day is guaranteed.
In a 1984 apostolic letter on the Christian meaning of human suffering titled Salvifici Dolores, Pope John Paul II wrote,
"Man in a special fashion becomes a way for the church when suffering enters his life.
This happens, as we know, at different moments in life.
It takes place in different ways.
It assumes different dimensions.
Nevertheless, in whatever form suffering seems to be, and is, almost inseparable from man's earthly existence.
Just because suffering is inevitable for us,
doesn't mean that it ever becomes easy or comfortable.
But it is something that we can get through, grow from, and come to a better understanding of God's incredible love for us.
A love so deep that he endured a painful death for you, me, and the world."
Next, Angelica tells us about a difficult time she had in her life when she experienced suffering.
When my grandmother was diagnosed with cancer a couple years back, it was a lot of stress over my family and I, especially with my mother, and it was hard to see everyone try to make her happy, because we could see it, that she was sad and that she was in pain, but she kept trying to hide it. We knew that we couldn't do anything to help her, and of course, because we love her, we would try. Even after her death, it was a lot of pain for me. I cried continuously. It was unreal, the thought that she's not living anymore and that I wouldn't be able to see her because she was such a generous person that having to lose her is like, why her? Why couldn't it have been me? I didn't want to see anyone who I'm close to go through pain. My faith at that time was all I had. My mom always had family gatherings where we would pray, or just going to Mass, I'd pray in her name. And my cousins and I even did rosaries, and we dedicated it all to her, and I would always pray for her to get better. I was always hoping. And I knew that regardless of what the outcome would have been, that God was on her side and our side. There has been a time where I've helped one of my friends who was going through a suffering with family, that she felt her life was going down and she was doing things that weren't helping her. And she even told me, you know, God can't help me with this, or if he did, you know, why isn't he now? I don't feel that he's helping me. I don't feel that he cares, that he loves me. He forgot about me. And I told her, no way that he could forget about you. You need to seek to him. You need to go to God. You need to be the one to talk to him and to let him know, I'm going through something and I need your help.
When I mentioned earlier the story about my uncle and how we grew apart because of what he did, it really hurt me. Like, I cried all the time. I didn't want to talk to him. It was to the point where, like, I blocked his number from my phone, and I still won't talk to him to this day. So I'm still suffering from that experience.
With my grandpa's passing, it's sort of like that sad reality, like the person you know and loved is gone now. The only thing that keeps me comforted is that he's in heaven with God. But still, it's the loneliness, you know, like expecting him to walk through the door.
I had a friend who betrayed me. I still feel like it hurts me sometimes because she had kind of like left me for like another group of friends, and she wanted me to be more like popular, and she didn't understand why I didn't want to be like her and like all those other girls. So I understand that like you're still suffering from something that happened.
The time when I was suffering is when my stepdad got surgery, and like the result of it could have been like cancerous. So I was like in 6th grade, and everyone always says when you're like feeling sad, you should express your feelings. But the way I really coped with it, I went up in my room, shut my door, and just sat on my bed. Just being alone, letting your mind like sort through everything, it really helped me, you know, cope with what was going on.
With my group of friends and all that like left and all, with me, I went to my newer friends and like I went to them and to see what they would do about the situation and all. And they told me just to like slowly back away from them, because if they weren't willing to let me like expand and all, they're obviously not true friends if they don't want me to be myself and stuff.
For me, with the story about my grandmother, I spent all of my energy trying to make my dad feel better, that I didn't want to think about it for myself. I thought it was pathetic for me to be upset because what he was going through was so much worse. So I kind of pushed my grieving to the side, and I ended up going through a really deep depression because I was not letting myself get over it. And it took a long time of actually going through the pain to get out of the pain.
When my Nana's aunt was dying of cancer, and it was just really hard to see my mom, my Nana, and my grandfather just seeing her suffer. So my mother and I, we went to her bedside. I just, you know, put my hands together and I just prayed to God, and I just said, please just let her stop suffering, just let her be at peace. And not even a few moments later, she had passed on. All her family came that day, and you can tell that she was at peace with herself. Every year, the anniversary of her death, we all get together and we celebrate her life. In what ways can good come out of suffering?
This is a difficult idea to grasp, that good could come from pain and suffering.
Let's see if the teens on the street were able to make this connection in their lives.
Good can come out of suffering because when you suffer, you become a stronger person from that experience.
I do think good can come out of suffering in that it makes you more humble, it makes you a stronger person inside.
Good can come out of suffering. You just become a stronger person and more independent.
What doesn't kill you can only make you stronger, so yes.
If you're suffering and then you experience somebody else suffering, I think you have more compassion for them.
You learn to feel pain and empathy for others that are also suffering.
Everybody's gonna have to suffer in their point of life, but I don't think anything good can come out of it.
When people suffer, it usually tends to bring other people closer together than they were.
There is good that comes out of suffering because you can't appreciate the good things if you never experience the bad.
They realize that your whole life is not going to be just one happy day. You're going to have those bad days, and you're going to have things that happen to you in your life that will make you suffer. But if you're a strong enough person to move on and, you know, learn from it, then it'll benefit you.
I've went through a depression at one point. It had to do with boys, of course, but like it was pretty serious, and a lot of good came from it because I've learned who not to trust, who to trust. I've learned what kind of person I am.
I lost a good friend of mine, and through that I suffered a lot. A good friend of mine's best friend just moved away, so I know what it's like to miss your best friend and to not have him there anymore. So I'm just trying to help him get through it, help his girlfriend get through it.
My dad passed on. In situations like that, you can really find out who your real friends are. My friend, she like stayed with me all night, and then I realized like she is someone, like one of my best friends that I'll have for a long time.
It brought me closer to God in a way I really wanted to be. It taught me that He's always going to be there for me to catch me when I'm falling.
Suffering can bring you closer to people, because like I would be upset in one class and like one girl would just come up to me and just like start talking to me, and she became one of my best friends from that.
It's real easy to sit here in the aftermath to talk about the good that can come from suffering.
But in the moment of our pain and suffering, it's hard sometimes to see the good.
We may become consumed by our suffering and feel alone and helpless.
In fact, it is during times of suffering that we may question or even blame God for the pain we have to endure.
Perhaps becoming angry at God for not preventing this painful experience.
Next, Angelica tells us about how, at times, she was angry at God and even doubted His existence.
She'll share how a religious education teacher opened her eyes to the meaning of suffering.
And helped her to understand that suffering is something we all experience.
And that we can look to Jesus' suffering and victory over death to lift us up when we hurt.
I have been angry a lot at God if I'm going through something. There have been times where I've said, why would He put me through this? Or what's the good that's going to come from this? There have been times that I have doubted the existence of God and that He was even there helping us and guiding us to a better path of life, that He loved us and that He cared for us. Then why is He putting us through pain? I had found my answer through my religious ed teacher. A lot of the times that I went through his class and just his lessons and for the way he looked at situations that people were put through or his own situations helped me clear out mine and helped me realize that I'm definitely not the only person going through something, and not only that, but that Jesus Christ has been through a lot worse, and being on that cross, it's just like my problems are nowhere near what He went through or what other people are suffering in the world. The class opened my eyes, and everyone's input in that classroom just really helps me through like my anger or frustration with God. Jesus' story inspires me to take my suffering, if I can offer it up to something holy, to something that can help someone else, to either give a person advice to something that they're suffering as well.
When I was younger, I got like this beautiful like cross necklace for my communion, and I always wore it. And then this one summer, my dad passed away, and then I was like, okay, I'll wear this cross because I know he's in a better place now. And then at the end of the summer, like one of my close friends like went to juvie was dealing with like a bad experience. I feel like I was alone, 2 really bad things like in a course of 2 months. I stopped wearing the cross for a while, and then like one day I just saw it on my dresser. I'm just like, no, that's not what I should be doing. I should definitely put that back on, and so I've been wearing it for a while.
When I was younger, I always questioned God, like, why is He allowed deaths to happen? Why is He allowed gunmen to go into schools? Why does He allow bombs to go off? But obviously now I'm older, I understand He gives people free will. He gives them the choice to do things or not do things. I've learned to accept everything that happens and know good things come out of bad and everything happens for a reason.
When I was in middle school and the beginning of high school, I was being like cyberbullied, and I felt like I didn't really have many friends at the time. And I was like, thinking like, how could this be? Like, how could this happen? Like, God wouldn't want this to happen, so He obviously must not be there. Now looking back, I realized that those were kind of like silly things to say, because I realized that God was there and He did actually help me through. It just made me really close to my parents because they also helped me through. And now I don't doubt God's existence because I know He's always with me.
Right after my grandmother died, my cousin died, and he was only 20. And for a while after that, I really had lost my faith. I questioned why God could take 2 amazing people away from my family. And I thought, you know, these 2 people that died were so holy, and they would hate to think that I lost my faith because it was their time to die. So when I finally got back to my faith, it gave me peace, and actually it brought me to a better place.
There was a time a few years ago when a good friend of my family passed away from cancer. I was thinking to myself, why did it happen to her? I've known her my whole life, and she was one of my closest friends, and I didn't understand why. But then I became really good friends with my current friends, and they helped me through that, so you really need friends to get you through that kind of thing.
As Catholic Christians, we are called to imitate Christ.
Jesus the Christ, who saved the world from sin.
We have been redeemed through his willingness to offer his life up for us.
In his letter on suffering, Pope John Paul II also wrote,
in bringing about the redemption through suffering, Christ has also raised human suffering to the level of redemption.
Thus, each man, in his suffering, can also become a sharer in the redemptive suffering of Christ.
So like Christ, we can offer our suffering up to God in the name of others who may also be suffering.
By offering up our pain to God as a form of sacrifice, like Jesus offered himself as a living sacrifice.
Or we can share our story of our triumph over suffering.
And some of us may simply inspire others by the way we approach our own personal suffering with grace and joy.
There are beautiful people who live in pain every day, and still they smile, care for others, and make people laugh.
Next, we asked the teens on the street how they thought we can make suffering holy.
And what their faith teaches them about this.
We can make our suffering holy by going to church and talking about our suffering with others and explaining what it feels like to suffer.
Going to church or whatever, talking about it, I guess that can make it holy.
Thinking about Jesus and what he's given up for me.
It really shows us that we should be able to suffer too. Because Jesus did it for us, we should be able to do it for others.
By him suffering, people seeing that he was able to go through it, it's easier, I guess, for other people to maybe go through whatever they're suffering through.
Angelica also shares with us how she has found we can make our suffering holy.
As well as other ways that have helped her to get through times of suffering.
I'd ask advice from my mother or family members that were also dealing with a similar amount of pain that I was. Praying helped me a lot. I felt that God's presence was there when I was speaking, and I let him know how I felt, and it helped a lot to cry, not to hold everything in, and to be at peace with God helped me deal with all of that. Advice that I would give to a person to make their suffering holy is to do charity work, go or gather up with family as I did and pray, do rosaries, help children out, the poor, feed the needy, donate money to someone who needs it. Church is really the biggest advice that I would give to someone, because when you go to church, you should be feeling the peace or the love, the harmony inside of you, or as they say, the Holy Spirit entering your heart. Whether you believe it or not, God is always there for us and he cares for us. If you take your sufferings and go to Mass or do something good in the world, you'll realize that whatever you were going through wasn't that bad. My mother is definitely a role model for transferring sufferings into something that's holy. Because anytime that she has suffered something, or if she's depressed or sad, she will go to church and pray, read the Bible. Every single time that she's going through something, God is always the one that she has faith in. God is always the one that she turns to. It amazes me how happy she turns from the situation, or how much better she feels after she talks to God. It inspires me to be more like her. I want to be as religious as she is, and to know that anything that I go through in life, I don't have to look for someone. I can just simply look at God, and I can just simply just pray or do a rosary or go to church or turn on the Catholic channel. It will just bring peace to me.
Turning to God, the same thing happened with my grandma when my grandpa passed. Shortly after that, her friends started passing away, 2 of them. And she was really religious. She said, we can do all the medical procedures we want, but in the end, it's up to God, and we have to use this suffering to bring us close to him and to keep us together as a family. And I really want to be like her, because she's wise and teaches us how to stay faithful in God.
You can make your suffering holy by sharing it with other people so that they don't have to go through the same thing. Well, that's what I did with the first story I told about the boy who was hurting me. And there was a girl who kind of liked him, and I took her aside and I told her a story, and to just watch out and don't put herself in a situation. I didn't tell her what to do, but I just made her aware, and I think that helped her.
Our religion gives us so many opportunities to make our suffering holy. Not only can we talk to God anytime, because he's always listening, but we can go to church almost anytime. And there's Mass every day. There has to be Mass every day. So I can go whenever I want, wherever I want, to make my suffering better and to talk about it with God.
I know with me, I was really young when my grandfather passed away, and I just remember getting a rosary from my mom, like after that happened and all. And I remember I would just go up to my room every single day and just sit up there with the rosary. And like, I was young, so like I wasn't completely sure what to do with the rosary, but I remember just like holding it and just remembering that like everything would be okay because somebody is always there for me, and like it will get better.
Every time we see the crucifix, one of the most common signs of our faith,
we are reminded that Jesus suffered for us in a very real and personal way.
but we also know through faith that his suffering had meaning and purpose.
That his suffering saved the world.
Our own personal suffering can also remind us of what it means to follow in Christ's footsteps.
That these footsteps lead us to the cross.
And we can use this cross on behalf of others in a real and spiritual way.
It can lead us closer to the resurrection.
Because the path to the cross is the same path to heaven.
So can you share any stories of how you made your suffering holy?
We'd love to know.
Contact us at RealfaithTV.com.
Or share your thoughts with us on Twitter.
And we'll leave you today with this from Paul's second letter to the Corinthians.
For as Christ's sufferings overflow to us,
so through Christ does our encouragement also overflow.
If we are afflicted, it is for your encouragement and salvation.
If we are encouraged, it is for your encouragement, which enables you to endure the same suffering that we suffer.
So remember, God does not let us suffer alone.
He showed us the way that continues to walk with us.
As we follow him to the cross, we too can make our suffering holy.
And find a rest for our weary hearts and everlasting love with him.
Thanks for watching.
We'll see you next time on
Real Faith TV. God bless.